Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. Really good to be here. And thanks for Simply Brilliant. Simply Brilliant talks about zebras all the time. So I'll switch that up and I'm going to talk about elephants. So hopefully you can see some elephants on the screen. So why elephants? Well, I kind of like them and I was lucky enough to see quite a few in Africa when I was over there. So I started using this sort of the elephant in the room metaphor when I wrote my third book on L&D. And the book was about learning transfer. So that's kind of the reliable, conversion of learning into action that's useful for the organization. And I think many conversations in L&D focus around content, what it is, how to deliver it, how to curate it, how to personalize it, what people have looked at and even, maybe, how many bums are on seats for how long and that sort of thing. The trouble is that focus on content, most training and e-learning in organizations tends to, as a result of that content focus, not result in as much behavior change as people might like to have. So, we've got a really sneaky elephant in there. So here's one stealing your coffee. They are sneaky. So the question there for me really is, why am I doing this L&D stuff? So for me, that's a really big question. And I think it's a question not often asked. So other than compliance, most of the time when you're doing L&D stuff, you want people to do things differently and you want them to do different things. In other words, it's all about doing, it's about behaviors, and learning is really only a small part of helping people do things differently and do different things. So even if it's compliance training, actually, we still want them doing things right, even, which is much more than just answering a compliance test. So our bottom line is behavior change that leads to improved performance while people are executing the organizational strategy. Here's a cartoon I saw once, which kind of sums some of it up. If in the absence of magic pixie dust, what gets in the way of us in L&D accomplishing reliable, predictable, and sustained behavior change in our delegates? And that's something that I don't think's often asked enough times. So what we need is to sort of look at things a little differently. So I saw that wonderful photograph of the elephant's trunk, which I thought was just kind of different. So let's get the elephant out of the room. Not an easy thing, but it's okay to do. And by the way, if you want a copy of my book that does talk about the elephant, so I'll send you one later if you're interested in getting one. So another great question here is, let's start from this. How do we deliver behaviors? As opposed to how do we deliver content or e-learning or anything else that we want to deliver? How do we actually deliver the desired behaviors? And this is very different to the normal question of what learning do they need, which gets kind of morphed into what content do they need? And then you end up with this whole content discussion. I think it's much more important that it's focused on the behavioral discussion. So we need to be designing for behavior change, not for content delivery. So start with the end in mind, which is the design behaviors. And I've actually coined the term of BNA, another acronym, Behavioral Needs Analysis, or a BNA. Not for today. I've run whole seminars and conference sessions on that. So if you're interested in that, do get in touch. But it's about getting a set of behaviors that you and the business stakeholders have agreed on what, on those behaviors that you want. And then you're going to start thinking about, well, how do people change behavior? And that's really going to be a number of things that add up over time. Behavioral change doesn't happen at once. It's going to be the result of many, typically small actions taken over an extended period of time. Now, there may be a week or two, it may be a month or two, maybe be a year or two. So it's very rare that we make a significant work-related change just kind of overnight. So really what we want to do here is we need to set up a process to deliver all of the things that people need to do in order to accomplish that behavior change. So that process is going to consist of many actions spread over time. How many actions, how much time? That obviously depends very much on the behavior change you're seeking to deliver. So you think, how do we construct that process? How do we set it up? And one of the ways you can look at that is think of the destination. What's your desired set of behaviors? Initially, you could just keep it simple and talk about one behavior. But what is that behavior that we want them to start actually operationalizing out there in workland? So what you've got to do is thinking, well, how does someone else do that? And we've got a whole process wrapped around how you can think that one through. But effectively, what you're going to have to do is create a sequence of tasks and actions that will enable someone to start from where they are. And as they go through those tasks, they will get to do that behavior reliably and ideally habitually in the work thing. So as an analogy, you might think of how a sat-nav works. So you enter a destination, and the AI within the sat-nav, does what it does and calculates a route for you and designs a set of turn-by-turn instructions for you to take. And if you follow those instructions, you're going to get to your destination pretty much guaranteed. So success there really relies on 4 things. You know your destination, you know where you are now, the instructions that are created are fit for purpose, and you follow the instructions. So this is a workflow with those 4 different things that need to be in place. So start thinking of the destination as perhaps a behavioral destination. So a workflow is a step-by-step set of actions that will get you to your defined end result. So those instructions in the sat-nav, they make up that workflow. And the platform we've built is really a workflow platform for behavioral destinations. So it's set up to deliver activity spread over time, whereas most learning systems are set up to deliver content. And that's just not enough. There's a lot more that has to be done in order for that content to actually become something useful out there in the business, something impactful. So I use the term learning workflow platform, another acronym, LWP. So there you go. Hopefully what I've just said has made you stop and think a little bit. It should have, is what am I really trying to achieve here, and how do I start looking at behaviors rather than just thinking curriculums and content, and maybe fancy ways to curate, develop, and pull that content apart, put it back together and personalize it and so on. There's a lot that can be done, and I'm not saying any of that is bad, but it's only a part of the equation, and sometimes a very small part of what's required to get someone to behaviors. Remember I said it's a new view, a new perspective on looking at things that'll make a difference. So just to stick with the elephant theme, I thought about looking for a picture for learner-centric, and anyway, there's the little learner in the middle. But what we've got to do is the learner is the locus of learning, not the event or the e-learning module or whatever it is. So we're going to put the learner at the center of things and then support them with whatever they need to take the steps they need to take to make the journey from wherever they are to wherever we want them to be in terms of a behavioral destination. So what is that journey? They need to know all those steps. They need to maybe consume some content. They need to experiment, need to practice. They need to confer and discuss with colleagues, need to reflect, more practice, seek feedback, and so on. And so therefore, this is applicable to everything from things like onboarding right through to team supervisor management, line management, leadership, even things we've had people run workflows on our system for things like developing charisma, things like feedback skills. It's also being used for things like qualifications, apprenticeships, a whole range of things. So it's very agnostic in a way of what's there, provided what you're wanting out the other end is a behavior change and a way to measure, observe, and assess that behavior change. We've got all that sort of stuff bolted in as well. So what you need as well, obviously, during that is like a way to see what's going on. So you need measures in place. I mean, for example, we've got an effective Kirkpatrick level 3 evaluation tool built right into it. So you can look at observable behaviors and how those change over the time or the length of the workflow. We've got all sorts of other stuff built in, even things like gathering a bit of data for ROI calculations and so on. So there's everything in there you need to sort of build your own learning workflows. Or again, we've got a few off the shelf that have had good outings in places as variable, lots of different big blue chip companies that you would know the names of. So the system will actually quite happily stand alone, or it'll sit alongside other learning systems since it's doing a different job to most of those. For this little session, I opted not to try and do a demo or even show, fancy screenshots or anything like that. There's just simply not enough time to dig into the richness of what's there. So if what I've said resonates with you and you want to explore it further, let's have a chat. And then we can go into a demo and look at what's there. But quite honestly, if you're just interested in delivering content from an academy and that's really all you're after, we're just not the company to talk to. So, despite that, I'm still happy to talk about learning and behavioral needs analysis and all the other stuff. So I just love having learning chats. What I've got here is a few goodies for you. So you'll get these in the PDF of the slideshow that Ali sends out. So there's some ebooks and stuff I wrote, some other bits and pieces. There's a recorded webinar, and if you want a copy of my book on learning transfer, by the way, just let me know and I'll send you a copy of my compliments. You're very welcome. And do, you know, get in touch on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat about learning and learning strategy. I've done a lot of consultancy work with, you know, big organizations on that as well. So that's all for me. So bye for now. End of elephant.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. That was great.